101.
That's what I, all right, that's what mine is, so.
And,
Let me look when I get back to the office. Okay. Make sure I'm going.
Lee doesn't have the job.
I used to be the
Well-
Toastmaster.
Can I borrow a sheet of paper?
We're still hoping that a couple rolls walk in the door here, but if we want to stay on time, we need to get going. I'm almost feeling like maybe our meetings need to be 7:05.
No, I gotta get here at 7:10.
Yeah.
Pretty slow.
We just don't tell them.
Yeah.
Has anyone given any speeches? Come on, we need to spend some time. Done something.
We had a series of reevaluating goals or resources for the day, and these are cool stuff between our Twitter, doing kayaking until October, potentially into November, depending on weather. So we got to talk a lot about that and really advocating what we have, just what they want us to do. So it's really good. But it's more like table topics than a speech, but
Good, all right. So this is Long John Silver. Welcome.
Welcome. Did everything go all right?
Yes.
I have a new ATM.
Congratulations.
Oh, wow.
What do you think
So,
that's yours now?
The,
Yeah.
oh yes,
I think
checks.
it just needs
Oh,
to
yes.
be needed for her.
This was
So yes, dues are due
Scroll up to her picture.
soon. So hot seat rolls,
Oh, that way. That way
if,
works too.
as we're still setting up sound, it sounds like, but, so Laura Lee, if Cody doesn't make it, could you be the general evaluator?
yes.
And then we also need a Toastmaster.
Oh. Who's
I got one.
Toastmaster?
It's Dave,
I was
but I'm losing hope he's gonna walk through the door at the right second here.
Yeah, he needs to get up here in about 2 minutes.
And so that's what we need to get going today.
If you wanted to start talking through the roles of everybody that if Dave walks in.
All right. So our first speaker today is going to be Jaylene, and she's evaluated by Christina. Then speaker number 2 is Brian, going to be evaluated by Kathleen. Our grammarian for today is Julia. Do you have a word?
I do.
Excellent.
I was like, am I ready?
Yes,
So the word of the day is appetence. An eager desire, an instinctive inclination, an attraction or natural bond. And in a sentence, my daughter's cheer coach said Caitlin showed a great attitude and appetence to learning and understanding the moves. And I've also learned that appetence is the world's first slow dating app for singles.
Well, I have an appetence for Dave to walk in the door. Then our table topics today is Svetlana. Do you want to tell us what your theme is, or?
Yes, my theme is down memory lane. Down memory lane. Can you hear me? Down memory lane. Memory lane. Yes, yes. Because today is 9/11, and it's something to remember.
Thank you. Our timer for today is Brian. Would you please explain your role?
Good morning. I will be testing out the new timer sheet, which very handily has the sort of cheat sheet for how long your green light, your yellow light, and your red light are. And I need to know the speakers, Christina be, how many minutes are you requesting?
Jaylene?
Oh, Jamie, I'm sorry. Okay,
I am 8 minutes.
8 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes. I'll be done at 7:57.
Our hot seat general evaluator is Laura Lee. Before you eat your pancakes, would you please tell us what your role today will be?
You were very quick at that. That was almost a bite. I will be evaluating the overall meeting, and that is everyone who isn't getting evaluated. So I'm going to be talking about table topics and our grammarian, our timer, and most especially our Toastmaster, who is now
I
hot
guess it's
seat,
me.
and our speech evaluators to help them provide better feedback.
Thank you. Excellent explanation. So I know nothing about what the speeches will be today. But Jaylene, would you please tell us, are you giving a manual speech and what the goals of your speech are?
Yeah, it's a research speech. And so there you go. I researched a topic, and shall I just tell you what the topic is now?
Yes,
All
please.
right. I researched the topic of emotional intelligence.
Ooh.
So the title of the speech is, Why Should We Care About Emotional Intelligence?
Excellent. So a research speech on emotional intelligence.
Yes.
Looking forward to this. And I skipped a step, which is to hand the sign up around. So that will go around the room. So please look forward to the future. And for the moment, let's welcome Jaylene to give her speech on emotional intelligence. I love it.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster and President.
Emotional intelligence.
If I were an emotional intelligence superhero, I would be EI guy. And I would be, my superpowers would be to look into people's hearts and brains and see what they're feeling and thinking and motivate them to the highest good for all. I would swoop into relationship discussions and into meeting room conversations and into war room negotiations. And I would save the world. All right. I am not EI guy fully, but I do embody some of those superhero powers that EI guy has, and so can you. So what is this thing, emotional intelligence? The theory of emotional intelligence began in 1990 when it was written up by researchers at Yale and the University of New Hampshire. And then in 1995, Daniel Goleman popularized it. He's a psychologist and a science writer for the New York Times. And he wrote the book, Emotional Intelligence. Goleman said, and I quote, "When I compare star performers with the average ones in senior leadership positions, nearly 90% of the difference in their profiles was attributable to emotional intelligence rather than cognitive abilities." End quote. The good news is that unlike IQ, EQ is a skill that can be learned. So here's the definition. Emotional intelligence is also called EI or EQ. It's the ability to sense, understand, and effectively apply the power of emotions to facilitate high levels of collaboration and productivity. That definition and the other definitions I'll share with you today are from TTI Success Insights. It's an organization that's 30 years old, and they designed assessments to help people develop professionally and personally. And one of those assessments is on emotional intelligence. I happen to be certified in using several of their assessments, including that one. So here's the big picture. There's 5 domains of emotional intelligence, and they're split into 2 areas. And I'm going to share a definition and an example in each of those. So the first area is intrapersonal skills. What's going on inside you? And the first domain is self-awareness. The definition of that is recognizing and understanding your moods, emotions, and drives, as well as their effect on other people. An example is emotions precede actions. So when you're happy, you smile. It's not the other way around. So I'm only going to give you one tip for improvement as we go along today, and this is the place right here, because this is the first step in developing your own emotional intelligence. So the tip is just think to yourself right now, answer this question. What am I feeling right now? That's the first step in developing your emotional intelligence. And that leads to the next step, which is the second domain called self-regulation. The definition of that is being able to control or redirect your disruptive impulses and moods and suspend judgment and think before acting. An example of this is, let's say in a workplace, you're faced with a tough decision. And in the past, you had a negative experience with that. So instantly, you want to say no. So self-regulation would be that first you're aware that you're having that instant, probably inaccurate feeling that you want to say no. And then you take the time to press pause, clarify the current situation, and make the best decision for that situation. And that leads to the third domain of motivation. Motivation is defined as having a passion to work for reasons that go beyond money or status. So intrinsic motivation, and pursuing goals with energy and persistence. An example of that is, let's go back to that tough decision. So you're faced with that tough decision. You clarify how you're feeling in the moment, and you notice that you want to say no, but you're not saying no right away. And you actually give thought to what is your desired outcome? What is the end that you have in mind? And that will help you understand why it's so important to you. And then you actually have that intrinsic motivation to make the best decision. That leads to the fourth domain, which takes us into the second area. So the first area was interpersonal, all about what's going on inside you. The second area is interpersonal. Oh my goodness, what's going on inside you and other people. So the definition of social awareness is understanding and relating to the emotional makeup of other people and treating them according to their emotions. An example of that is when you walk into a room with other people, you can read the room. Perhaps you sense there's a tension in the air or there's an odd silence. You're practicing social awareness. That leads to the fifth domain of social regulation. The definition is managing interpersonal relationships and building interpersonal networks, being able to find common ground and build rapport with others. An example of that is leaders with good EQ can sense when employees have a good emotional state, and they know that's a good time to bring on new projects and challenges. When they're in a weak emotional state, it means time to lay low and stay in the comfort zone. So that's it. That's emotional intelligence. I hope you enjoyed learning more about it, and I hope you're a little curious about developing it in yourself, because it leads to a better world. In a July 2018 article from CNN, Yale University's Mark Brackett said, "There is no question in my mind that if people were to really appreciate how important emotions are, allow themselves to have emotions, and made space for other people to have emotions, and handle those emotions skillfully in the service of making a better world, we would, in fact, have a better world." So I say, power to all of our inner EI guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam President Toastmaster.
I was thinking when you were giving that what I was feeling was unpreparedness. And then I thought, well, I have an abstinence for happiness. We've had one speaker. We're about ready to have our second speaker, and I have his book and title.
Yeah, we can read it.
That's a big if. You don't read much. Not much. Even with my glasses, I don't see too well. Sorry, I'm late. I'm at the mercy of other people coming to relieve me there, and I got a call at 6:25 saying, I'm going to be late. I'm coming from Sept. I'll get there because I can. And needless to say, I wasn't very happy. It was until I got that phone call. I'm not going to waste a lot of time with theme stuff. I had some things that I was going to talk about. Spring. Not spring, autumn. And how much I appreciate having 2 seasons over here, wet and dry, as opposed to the 4 seasons in the valley where you're freezing your butt off in the wintertime. And another person that some people keep track of seasons by it's either fishing season or hunting season. And that was my primary way. So this right now would be hunting season for me in the old days. I am rambling right now to give you a little time to fill out your little evaluation form. And in a minute, I will introduce the second speaker and we will be on our way. And I got an email from our second speaker telling me what her title was and everything. And I'm trying to read my own notes about that.
Yeah.
Was that?
Yeah, we.
Did we?
Brian.
Brian, okay,
Second speaker.
okay. Because the email I got was from,
Yeah, I sent you a text message. So.
yeah. I got both. I didn't know which was which.
Yeah, so I'm going next.
So I was, okay. I can't read the last word there.
Complicated.
Complicated.
That's why I wrote it.
That is complicated. Okay. Our next speaker has been active in the club almost from the very first month that he joined us. He got drafted into being an officer right off the bat, and he has served admirably in several positions, most recently as our like 2-year term as club president, and now he's got the job of educational vice president, which, as I recall, when I was doing these things, I thought was the hardest job of all of them. And I don't know how well I did the job, but I know it was a daunting task. So I appreciate that he was able to take that on. He's noted for his kind of dark sense of humor sometimes, given his occupation. But I enjoy hearing him speak because most often he's a real live wire. Please welcome Brian. His title of his speech is "Some People Will Call Me Complicated."
Some people call me complicated, and I have to agree. If you look deep into the palms of my hands, you will see my parents and all the generations of my ancestors. And they are alive in me. They are in my DNA. And as I'm making my life-changing and really important decision, I remember the words of Philip Carr, who said that the songs of our ancestors are the songs of our children. So as I'm making these really life-changing decisions, I am appetent that my decisions will help and not hinder my children and my grandchildren. But I wasn't always really complicated. In fact, July 31st, 1962, probably the greatest day in the history of this world. I was born. And the whole world was there for me. I could go, and I get the bottle. I could look at somebody and they'd smile and they'd hug me. But as I started to grow older, I started to realize that the whole world wasn't just about me, that there were other people that have helped me get to where I am. And so as I was looking for kind of a symbol of that, I chose out of an old box some old ribbons of mine that talk about the story of when I was in the military. And it's symbolic to our lives because each ribbon tells a story. For example, this one talks about national defense. And this one talks about overseas deployments. And this one talks about a significant time or a significant moment in my life while I was in the military. And so I want to introduce some more characters of my life that got me to where I am. And so I am going to go way back to Mr. Anton Meyer. And Mr. Anton Meyer came from Switzerland in the early 1800s. And he was my great-great-great-grandfather. And as he came over the ocean in a tall ship, he was only able to bring certain things with him, and that was his family, one cow, and his favorite meerschaum pipe. And as I pass this around, I want you to think of a person from Switzerland leaving. He was a farmer, leaving everything that he had behind. And all he could bring was his children and just a couple items. And if you smell the pipe, you can almost smell the tobacco that he smoked, or maybe what my dad smoked in 1950 something. But that pipe is representative of his life and his dreams. You see, we are the fairy tales that our ancestors talked about. It was his dreams to bring his family to the United States for the American dream back in the early 1800s. And as I continue to tell my life story, I went to 23andMe, and I found out, and I pretty well knew it, but I found out that I am 99.5% European. And out of that 99.5% European, 51.2% is British and Irish. So I know that in 1563, I had an ancestor living somewhere in Europe. And as you hold that in your hand, think about the fact that our ancestors are just like us. You could hold a coin in your hand because you had to pay a bill. Maybe you had to buy some crops. Maybe my ancestor, who was living in a thatched hut where it's 90% of the time mud all around him, and only had about a 30-year life expectancy, he had dreams as well. And those dreams, those fairy tales that he told, became me. I also found out that I am 13.1% Scandinavian and German. So Lee and I might have had some ancestors somewhere in the same area. But sometime around maybe 800 AD to, this isn't the real one, this is a replica. Maybe sometime between 800 AD and 1000 AD, I had an ancestor that wore an amulet or a charm like this around his neck, kind of like what I wear. And this charm is not happy that I have a green card at this point, but the people that would wear this might have even said the prayer on the back that was from the goddess Frigga, which is the wife of Odin, that says, unharmed away, unharmed return, unharmed safe home, as they traveled, just like we pray for our family members. So we are so much the same as our ancestors. And moving right along, I found out that I had just a little bit of Iberian and Turkish blood in me. And so maybe I had an ancestor that was a Roman, an Iberian soldier. And look at how it fits on my hand. Just like our ancestors would have worn. And maybe in 450 BC, I had an ancestor that was in Turkey that was in a war, just like we've served in wars and we have wars in our lifetime. But the most important thing that I want to share with you, and I'm pretty sure it's not going to come as any kind of a surprise, I have 287 Neanderthal variants, as you know, as I'm eating. But the important part about that, well, actually, what the shocking part is it makes up about 4% of my DNA, which is a little scary. But what that tells me is I have an ancestor, a common ancestor, that lived and died in the Neander Valley over 40,000 years ago. I am 40,000 years in the making. And that to me is both humbling and amazing. There's a Chinese proverb that says, to forget your ancestors is to be like a brook without a source or a tree without roots. So the next time you're making a very complicated decision, because we call it complicated, you can be complicated too, as you make a difficult decision that might affect the outcome of your children, your grandchildren. Mr. Toastmaster.
I've got one of these with about 2 more rows on it.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I didn't find all mine. No.
Well, I had the misfortune to serve someplace where you got a lot more ribbons.
Yeah.
Or good fortune, depending on how you look at it. I was thinking while you guys are filling out your little comment cards form, I got in trouble with one of my professors in college because I had proposed the theory. I was actually standing up for an author, Jean Auel, who wrote the Planet of the Cave Bear series, and she had Neanderthals mating with Cro-Magnon people, and my professor was insisting that never happened. There's absolutely no evidence of that happening. That was before DNA, when they found out it absolutely did happen, and I would dearly love to go back to that professor.
See? Look at my eyebrows.
So, thought that was very interesting. I wouldn't have brought that up today if you hadn't brought that, but it just reminded me of that professor and how she was really castigating me in front of the whole class for that hypothesis that possibly happened. And gratifying to know that I was right and she was wrong. One time. Are we ready for table topics? Svetlana, I think you're our table topics mistress.
Yes, I am. Thank you so much, Dave. Good. So the theme of the table topics today is down memory lane. I will ask very similar questions to which I expect to hear very different stories. Can you hear me? All of a sudden, everyone is frozen, and I want to know if you can hear me. Yes? Can you hear me? Yes.
Here's
Yes,
mine.
I can hear you.
So did you hear that I'm going to ask very similar questions, but hear different stories? The
Yeah.
first question is, what was the sudden bad news that you heard? Can you remember it? And how you felt before and after it? How your world changed before and after it? And the question goes to the person who is first, nearest to the screen on my right side, right-hand side, because I cannot see these people. Oh, great.
Thank you, Madam Table Topics Master. What popped in my mind because of how you introduced your table topics for the day was September 11th. I'm not sure what grade I was in, but I remember exactly what I was doing. I was in high school, was walking by our, what we called the East Side cafeteria, and there was a bunch of commotion in the lunchroom, which there's not usually a lot of people in this particular lunchroom, but there was a lot there that day. And I kind of peeked in the room thinking, who knows, like another high school thing, and peeked in, and all of the screens were tuned to the station. And we're watching the first tower burn, and then you see the second tower get hit. We're all standing there, and everybody is quiet. And for a group of kids to just be witnessing that, and there's no teachers around, there's like lunch ladies and whatnot, but we're all just, I mean, I'm emotional about it just thinking about it. It was a very interesting day, because I think we all thought that we were safe, especially from a kid standpoint, that we're safe and nothing can happen to us. And to see something so traumatic happen in a short amount of time and be publicized, it's great that it was publicized, because we all got to see it and instantly reach out to our family that was there in that city, but also like, wow, maybe we're not as safe as we think we are here. And I think that has a dynamic change in later years when I travel for work. I think about that as well.
I really wasn't sure if I was kind of, right and appropriate with my question, but our commotion on this side of the world was so similar. We were watching this as some kind of futuristic horror movie, and everybody was so upset. And this country where I'm now was one of the first countries that sent its condolences and support to the American people, that we all felt how small the world was and how all of us were one family indeed. My second question is going to sway you to the opposite side of your memory lane. And tell me about a sudden news that was extremely good. It was a very good news, and how you felt before and after it. Relive that story. And that question goes, of course, to the first person sitting next to the screen on the left-hand side.
Thank you, Madam Table Topics Master. The best news I ever got was the birth of my first child. And I remember standing at that window where the shopping window where the kids are, and looking down at this baby this now was my world. And there were a ton of things to learn. I was the first person in my family to change a diaper because one of the nurses just sort of grabbed me by the collar and said, hey, you're going to learn this. And everything was completely different because now I thought that I understood responsibility at that point. I was 26 years old, but now I had responsibility. Now I was actually on the hook. And it was just wonderful. It was such a terrific feeling to know that this little person, with everything this little person might become, you know, was a part of me. This was my child. This was my ancestors coming through me. It was an amazing and remarkable thing. I think it's still the best thing that ever happened to me, although it happened one more time. That's good.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Both answers, I think you will agree with me, are the evidence that the life is a miracle. Life itself is a miracle. Do we have time for the third question or not?
I think so. One more.
Okay. My third question, again, is very similar. Sudden news of your choice, bad or good. Sudden news that changed your life. Sudden news that changed your life. And the question goes to Lauralee, who is watching me very attentively.
Well, I'm not old enough really to remember 9/11. I was 3. And I only remember stories that my mom tells me about how I didn't want my dad to get on a plane after when he was going on business. But when you asked that question, the first thing that I thought about was when the school shooting happened and I was there. And granted, it wasn't really news that I heard, it was an announcement on the PA. But at that time, I actually had heard the shots before I heard the news. And we thought it was fireworks that seniors were setting off because they were already out of school, they were all graduated. But really, it was bad news because the school shooting happened, but it was good news in the fact that as the kids in my classroom were watching the news happen on social media, we knew that there was help coming. We knew that the police were there as it was happening. And as I stood in that parking lot, I knew that my friends were coming out of that building.
Thank you for those early table topics. Please take a moment to fill out who you think was the best table topic person today and pass them this direction, and I will appoint Lee as my surrogate vote counter. And he'll,
If you want, she can
okay,
put it right in.
down to that end. I wasn't going to send that in because both of those guys are in on the ballot. Both of those people, not guys, pardon me. I understand the difference. I'm getting my glasses. Plus, it is time now for Christina Book to be the evaluator of Jaylene. Christina has been with us a short time. I'd like to say about her table topics, I was very impressed. I didn't hear any ums and ahs in the whole presentation. Fantastic. So please welcome Jaylene for her evaluation.
Jaylene, fantastic job. From the beginning all the way till the end, I think you really kept us captivated. I loved the character of the EI guy and the introduction to that and your ability to wrap up your speech, kind of bringing us back to the beginning. You were supposed to present a research speech and present us with, show that it was well researched and present resources that are available upon request. Those were some of the items within your speech. Overall, I felt like you did a fantastic job of relaying the information to us. I was definitely engaged in what was going on. I was sometimes distracted by all the hand gestures and sometimes by your vocal variety. Sometimes it was too extreme and I was paying more attention to the excitement that your voice gave as opposed to the words you were saying. So maybe tone it down a little bit or choose specific moments where you can have that vocal variety that really punctuates what it is you're saying. You did a great job in moments of having that build up and then kind of the calm of the moment where you really wanted something to stick. So I really enjoyed that. Your eye contact with everybody was really good until you had to look at your notes. So always encouraging you to do less notes whenever possible. No notes is ideal for us. You had good citation within your speech. With this assignment, just have it maybe available for people to get the resources from you at the end or telling us how we can find out more information. You definitely encouraged us to apply it to ourselves right off the bat by asking questions. Continue to ask questions throughout to really keep us engaged and draw us in. But then give us that hint of, if you want to learn more about emotional intelligence, check out this or that, or this university has done a lot of research or something like this. Or you can just say, ooh. I noticed you did have a couple of filler words. There was a couple times you said and then you continued with your sentence. So just watch those audible pauses. The last thing would be, second to last thing. When the time cards started to show up, you were like, oh my gosh. And I know it's shocking when you get to the time before you think you're going to, but working on how do we acknowledge that, okay, it's a green card or it's a yellow or a red, and being able to continue on because it was like a stop in your speech. And then you did a great job picking back up, but it can be a little bit smoother. Overall, I loved your speech, and I wish you could speak for longer because I wanted to know more. And I love the power or empower all of our inner EI guys.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Thank you so much.
Just a reminder, don't run off so fast. You want to wait for the Toastmaster to come up here and take over the helm of the ship here. But I understand also the feeling that, God, I can get away from you.
I just have to say one fun thing.
Go ahead.
Emotional intelligence. Oh my gosh, that was a feeling that I needed to regulate. This is an example.
Yep, that aha moment. And we have the evaluator is Kathleen Ritzman for our second speaker. Please welcome Kathleen.
Thank you. Right. Fellow Toastmasters, I'm sure that you're well aware by now that Brian has a real appetite for telling stories. And even something that turns out not to be a story, as this one was today, we are still intrigued by what he is saying. The first objective for Brian was to learn to tell the elements of a good story. We did not have those in this. What we had was an absolutely awesome presentation about some of the things that make Brian who he is. The principles of a short story include having an introduction, some kind of background, but you need a protagonist who wants something, an antagonist who doesn't want him to get it, and a series of adventures between the two of them that lead up to an emotional peak where we're all involved, a decision has to be made, and then what they call a denouement or a resolution of what happens in the story. That is a story. What you told us today, though, was an interesting piece of something else called metonymy. And metonymy is where you use something to stand for something else. And in Brian's case, he began with his hands. His hands stood for all of him. And as he did his story, we also had ribbons. We had statistics. We had a pipe, a coin, an amulet, all of which stood for something or someone else that helps to make Brian who he is. So just because it was not a story, it still had elements of a story because we were learning about different characters that have participated in the process of making Brian who he is. I hope you noticed also something that Brian did, and I love how he does this when he tells a story, is that he does not speak too quickly. He uses his radio voice and gives us a chance to pause in our own minds and reflect on who this person might have been. Even though he never once told us physically what these individuals might have looked like, we could see them in their element, the kind of life that they might have lived or the place that they were as they were helping to create Brian, and they didn't even know it at the time. I also think that having these items that you brought, the opportunity to smell. So often we only look at the visual parts when we're here, but we hear people speak. Do we smell things? Not often. And today we had an opportunity to do that. So that again was a lovely piece of variety. I also think that something else that Brian did that was wonderful today was his use of quotations. I think that the ones that he used and shared with us really summarized and made the point of his story, which is the songs of our ancestors are the songs of our children. The songs of Brian's ancestors are the songs of his daughter. Fellow Toastmasters.
Very good. I think we're doing fine time-wise. Do we have a, yes?
Oh, I have one more thing I'd like to share.
Okay.
I forgot that I didn't read that I was supposed to provide like a way to learn more about EQ, but I do want to offer to everyone just outside the speech. I have a really great 15-page EQ book on EQ and 10 tips on how to improve your EQ. And anybody who wants it, I'd be happy to just email it to you. Yeah, okay.
Okay, do we have, I don't know if we managed to communicate to Svetlana or not, but do we have a table topics winner? Yeah, the voice disappeared.
Of course, yes. I was so engrossed in the meeting, brilliant speeches and absolutely amazing analysis, that I forgot to look at the chat. Yes, we do. The winner is Laura Lee. Laura Lee, congratulations.
Oh.
There we are.
Got it. You got everybody in the picture. Fantastic.
All right, one more.
Thank you.
One of my favorite things about autumn, this is my last little bit of tidbit I had on there, was that was the best for me season of the year for sports. I was in a small school in Toledo, and they will allow you to play more than one sport. And so in September, every morning at 5 o'clock, I went down to the pool for swim practice. Every evening, I had football practice, and I competed in those two sports, but they also had a cross-country team that knew I was in pretty good shape and knew I liked to run, and I ran cross-country. So I did 3 sports my junior and senior year in the fall of the year, and that was the most fun times of the year for me. It was just awesome. I didn't have time to be bored, that's for sure. I think it's time now to ask the general evaluator what her general ideas about our meeting were. And it's not my fault that I was late. And one more chance. Apathy.
we can't fault you for something that you didn't do, but I did think that it was great for our meeting that we were able to just keep going and we can adapt, which is something that is very necessary and something that Toastmasters strives to teach is how if someone doesn't show up, if there's some problem, there's an error in technology, you just need to keep going. You can't just stop. And I thought that we did start on time, which was a good thing. We just kept moving. And we started with the introductions, even though they were kind of like, hi, this person is here. But I liked that we were able to get the introductions going and able to say what table topics were, which was down memory lane, which I thought was a great way to introduce what we were going to be talking about. And the speakers, it was great to have them just introduce themselves. They knew what they were saying and they can just keep going. Dave, I did think that we did have the second introduction a little slow, but I know you were trying to get your bearings on exactly where we were. For table topics, I liked that you just opened up the question first, paused so everyone could think, and then ask someone. I don't think we do that sometimes. We sometimes call on the person and then ask the question. And instead you did it the opposite way, which I liked so that I could sit there and go, okay, what am I going to talk about if I'm called? And then, oh, I am called. So I could then talk about what I was thinking about. And for Christina, I liked how positive your evaluation was. And I liked how you gave specific information about what she was doing, what you were seeing. The one thing I did notice is you really talked straight to Jaylene and you didn't really look around the room. And I think that can help people listen to your evaluation and focus on, okay, how can I do this in my own speech? For Kathleen, I did like how it was more conversational and you kind of just talked about what he said. One thing I noticed, you didn't actually tell us what the speech was, what the let's get personal, I think is what the speech was. I didn't hear that, at least, or what manual it was from. So I think that, yeah, I think that would have just been helpful for us to know.
The general evaluator failed to comment that I missed one key thing. Do we have a grammarian's report? And a timer's report, yes. Get the grammarian's report out, and then we'll ask for a timer, and it'll be time to go.
Okay, wow, I thought we had excellent use of the English language today. Some of the things that I wrote down were actually notes during Jaylene's talk, but the self-awareness, self-regulation, social awareness, I loved all of that. Inspired for the American dream, fairy tales to the American dream, I loved that. There were, I think, 3 or 4 of us that used the word of the day, so that was excellent. Christina, I noticed and ah, but it was like when you were collecting your thoughts. So that is all of those words that I've heard. And Kathleen, I just feel like it's always a joy listening to you because I feel it's a lesson. And you have such a strong appetence of the English language. We are blessed with your wisdom. It's a gift for us.
Final timer's report, please, which I should have asked for before.
Mr. Toastmaster, Jaylene owes us 2 seconds. She was speaking for 5 to 7. She was at 6:58. Christina, or her evaluator, Christina, spoke for 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Brian Norris wanted 8 minutes and he went 8:30. So I guess he's the one who owes. Kathleen, his evaluator, spoke for 3 minutes and a second. She may have been on perfect 3 minutes, but I don't buy perfect. Christina, in her table topics, spoke for 1 minute 54 seconds. I went 1 minute and 30 seconds, and Laura Lee was 1 minute and 42 seconds.
Oh my. Great.
And it is time to go. If I can, we turn this back over to our Madam President.